Well, you guys heard the intro. You know what time it is. It's time for another CMS Connected here on the Pulse Network. I'm your host, Tyler Pyburn, and of course, I am always joined by my co-host, Mr. Scot Liewehr. Scott, how you doing today?
I'm pretty good, Tyler. How you doing, man?
I'm doing very well. We got just an absolutely awesome show lineup for everybody today. We're going to be talking about the beta release of, well, Sharepoint 2013. It's one of your favorite topics, really, isn't it?
It seems to be.
I like to set you up in that way.
We set me up every time like I'm a Sharepoint hater. I'm not a Sharepoint hater.
I know, not a hater, but of course, you know, Scott's not going to be the only person that's going to be delving into this. We've also got quite a few guests coming in studio, joining us here in Canton, Massachusetts, just south of Boston today. It's going to be a very interesting show indeed. Now, some of those guests, we're going to have Michael Pisarek, founder of Dynamic Owl Consulting and Sharepoint MVP at Microsoft. We'll also have Gail, Shlansky, Senior Director of Product Management for Acceler. But before we begin, of course, as always, got to acknowledge the fine folks that help put this entire show on and really make it all come together. First off, we have to say big thank you to Falcon-Software. Falcon actually provides web creative, e-commerce, content management, social media, and mobile solutions for organizations across the globe. And of course, Digital Clarity Group, DCG, is a research and advisory firm focused on navigating organizations through the digital transformation process. All right, so with all of that, in fact, in mind, we have to begin things off. And of course, we like to start it off the only way we know how, and that is with the news. So the first thing we're going to be talking about for August 2012 happens to be big data and marketing. It's a trap, apparently, according to some people. Now, this is what we're going to be discussing from a blog post by Robert Rose on August 20th. He actually wrote saying, quote, embracing the, quote, big data wave before we understand what we're going to may be the biggest mistake that marketers will make, since we were told sock puppets would make good company spokesmen. Now, he actually goes on to say the giant wave of big data is just about to break onto the enterprise marketing beach, and if we aren't careful, we're going to fall into a trap. So, Scott, kind of give me your thoughts. What are your takeaways from this post in particular? And is big data, especially as that wave crashes on the beach and over our heads right now?
It's funny, you know, this isn't, so this segment here is we're talking about news items, and this is less specifically news, right? But I think at DCG we had, Robert wrote that post on his own. I just did a radio show on SAP Radio where the topic was big data this week. We've been asked to do by Tech Target another thing on big data. So
we're
it just
actually
seems...
going to be talking CMS Connected next month, just as a precursor. We're going to be discussing big data next month on the next show, too.
Exactly. So, you know, while it's not a specific news item, nothing specifically happened, I thought it was worthy to just talk about big data in general and its position here. And, you know, my take on it is very similar to Robert's, which is that, look, it's important, it's relevant. When you're trying to find Osama bin Laden and you need a whole lot of data to be able to access and mine through, it's super, super relevant. Yeah. When you're a marketer and you're trying to figure out how to be relevant to your customers, certainly there are some brands that the notion of big data is relevant for them and they've made good use of it. But for your average marketer, they're not even using Google Analytics appropriately today.
But that's an issue. I mean, you're talking directly. This is my language right here. That's a major, major problem. And in fact, those people are in fact going to be utilizing it in due time, right?
No question. I mean, we've talked about marketers need to become more data-centric, right? They need to make more decisions rather than being off the cuff. They need to make them, you know, be a little bit more in tune with who their audience is. So there's no question it's a really good idea. But maybe we should define what big data is, because what I'm not doing is I'm not saying ignore data. What I am saying is the notion of big data, which is when we're talking about exabytes of information, more information that has gotten produced in the world all the way up until 2003, when it's so big that our typical, you know, databases, our relational databases can't even handle it, and you've got to have special tools built for it. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about mining tons and tons and tons of information in order to be able to come up with a couple of nuggets. So should you use Google Analytics and be more data aware about who's your audience, and even beyond Google Analytics? Absolutely. Big data, do you have to mine every single thing that everybody's ever said about your organization and pull that into the fray and figure out how to make use of it? I think not necessarily.
Okay, I like that. That was a nice way to end it. I think not. We'll leave it with that. All right, let's go on to the second topic right now that we want to hit up on. We'll talk about actually social networking and the phenomena. Is it coming to a halt or is it coming apart, really, as it seems, so to speak? So on August 17th, Virginia Bacadis, a senior partner at Brilliant Leap, wrote an article on CMS Wire about comments made by Eric Savitz at Forbes on how the social networking phenomena is coming apart at the seams. Now, while Savitz certainly makes a compelling argument about citing how Facebook, Groupon, Kayak, Angie's List, and Yelp, so on and so forth, their stock prices are at, however, near the all-time lows. Virgin Bacadis points out that he doesn't mention LinkedIn, whose valuation might be better compared to Salesforce.com's rather than to Facebook's, or Jive, whose actually shares are mostly rated a buy. And of course, there's also Microsoft's purchase of Yammer to be considered in all this mix as well. So do you agree with Savitz's assessment? Really, is the social network phenomena, is it coming apart at the seams? This is what we're hearing. Is it actually happening?
Okay, so I think there's a big distinction. Social is not going anywhere. In fact, I think we've talked about here on the show before that just the notion of social networking, that specific social networks themselves, that's kind of coming apart because it actually is so social that we're just talking about the social web in general, I think, that everything is social. It's introduced into every aspect, and that's how we're becoming relevant. That's how we're sharing information. That's how the notion of the empowered consumer is making decisions oftentimes by what their colleagues, who they might not even know necessarily, are saying out there about products, about that sort of stuff. So there's no question that social is very important. I think the point that they're making here is they're trying to go and say, looking on Wall Street and trying to figure out.
I was going to say, that's something that we need to actually focus in on. Because,
exactly.
I mean, obviously everybody's going to start to point fingers at Facebook more than anything right now, because that's the biggie. Everybody's seen, the big release at what it was going to be 38, then it went down to 33, then down and so on and so forth, back and forth, fluctuating. When we saw that actually, people are going to reference that no matter what. But you can't deny what's actually taking place on Wall Street. You have to wonder, okay, is there faith, which markets are based upon faith, is there enough faith in the social networks to actually drive any sort of revenue in terms of the Wall Street is concerned?
So the question is social still relevant? No question it is, right? I mean, we all know it every single day. I think that the question is there a business model there that they have yet tapped into appropriately to be able to make folks who are trying to make money off of these companies, and whether they should bet in them? I think the question is do they have a profit model appropriately? And that's a difficult question to answer.
Be able to figure out.
And I think they're right. There's something to be said for that. I mean, right now, if you look at it, primarily it's based on the notion of advertising, and they're looking about their means of making money is by allowing brands to advertise.
Well, honestly, think of it this way: social networking, which you talk about social marketing, the sites that are utilizing banner ads. So I mean, it's a backwards way of thinking in a sense.
Exactly. It's kind of taking that old paradigm and ushering it into the new and trying to presume that all is well and good. So I think there are other models. I don't know I don't want to try to prescribe here what they are. There are people that are far smarter than me that are trying to figure this out and obviously haven't been able to. But I think it might have to do more with kind of the way that we're going with online digital subscriptions and things. Maybe it might be membership based, might be.
Well, that goes back to our discussion. I want to say last CMS Connected. Free or paid. I mean, it's kind of that same idea. Yeah. Another discussion as, should it be behind a paywall or not? I mean, I think that's a similar topic, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think that's going to be both, the topic for the individuals and whether they should be paying, whether the model is for the organization. So LinkedIn is an example, right? I think that LinkedIn leaves a lot on the table. I'm the president of CM Pros, and we have like a 22,000 member group on LinkedIn. And we've been wanting to, people are asking us all the time, can you help us? Can you advertise? Can we advertise to that group? Can we sponsor the forum? Can we do certain things like that? And the answer is no, because the LinkedIn application doesn't allow us to do that. It's very watered down. There is no advertising within groups. So I think they're leaving some money on the table by not allowing these groups to maybe be able to do sort of things like that. We can't profit, they can't profit, we're not paying for that. So there might be some money-making abilities specifically with LinkedIn there. But yeah, so I think the point is valid. How do these guys make money? It's been a question. It'll continue to be a question for a while.
How do they make money? But also, I still.
Whether they're valid and relevant is not a question.
Exactly. Okay, let's go ahead and let's move on to number 3, and let's talk about a new Forrester report. And actually, multi-channel marketing has now become pretty common. This is something we heard, and it's a great spin-off from the last segment, really. It's one of the conclusions, actually, also according to a report from Forrester about marketing in the age of multiple ways to reach the customer. Now, the Forrester report entitled "The Multi-Channel Maturity Mandate," commissioned by Sitecore, states that mature multi-channel marketers reported that they aggressively adopted new technologies, are more inclined to work with IT, and work more collaboratively with sales departments in setting goals. Now, the report actually recommends that companies, quote, create a culture worships customer knowledge, and that marketers stop thinking about campaigns and start thinking about customer engagement. Now, toward that end, Forrester suggests that a company website be transformed into a pervasive customer engagement hub, and that companies, really their technical thinking, I just lost train of thought. That's a lot to read in this one. Forget about it. Scott, should marketers stop thinking about campaigns and start thinking about customer engagement? I'm just going to stop reading altogether.
Yeah, exactly.
Nonsensical thing.
No question they should. I mean, we've talked about, customer engagement or consumer engagement is the new currency of the web, right? I mean, it's that attention when we're talking about what we were just talking about before, about the subscription model for New York Times. Everybody's trying to figure out how to get people engaged, how to get their attention, because that's how you essentially, that's how you captivate your audience. And it's less about, can I sell you this thing over the web, but more about, can I become a source of information for you? Can I become your subject matter expert, I being the brand? And so the more information that we're putting out there that helps people make decisions, help people learn a little bit about the subject matter, and maybe less about your products, that notion of engagement is how you're going to get them to pay attention to you, how they're going to become loyal to you, how they're going to continue to come back to you. So yeah, I think less about campaigns and more about engagement. And if we start to think about the audience as the center of our universe, rather than what do I want to push to them, what do I want to tell them, and more about what are they interested in, how can I captivate them and get their attention? That's
now, are you saying, don't put any emphasis on campaigns? Because campaigns are still very powerful, aren't they? I mean, I think while they still need to be engaging, there's no question about that, but campaigns still have a valid place, don't they?
Yeah, it's not about getting rid of campaigns. It's about what the substance of said campaign becomes, right? So it's about now your campaigns, that's the way that you're getting information out. It might be a particular topic that you want to talk about in a particular month. Maybe as a campaign, you're going to do something like creating a channel like a CMS Connected to help put information out there, and that becomes a channel through which you're providing information and your expertise. You're gaining an audience, you're gaining engagement, and that kind of becomes your engagement. That becomes your campaign, and so maybe that becomes a source of leads for you, or whatever that might be. But so it's not doing away with campaigns. Okay. It's that the campaign becomes less about, let me figure out how I push Tide out into the market, and more about how do I help people understand the importance of washing their clothes.
Yeah. Okay, so let me tell you this. So that's actually a good example. So let me ask you from that perspective, B2B and B2C, does it differ? Do you think it changed? I know I'm going to put you on the spot with that, but you just mentioned Tide. No. What about B2B? Is it similar ideas or no?
It's exactly the same idea. The thing that we have to, and folks bring this up to me all the time, and when they say the businesses who are B2Bs, they say to me, well, I'm not B2C, so it doesn't really matter as much. Look, a business is composed of a whole bunch of consumers. A B is the sum of a whole bunch of Cs, right? And so at the end of the day, as the empowered consumer, we are individually having heightened expectations for how we interact with brands when we're making our own purchasing decisions. But when we're working as a part of a business and it's a B2B situation, you still have that notion, the same thing pervades, right? We still have those expectations. We still have those ways of making decisions. We're still going to look to others' experiences and subject matter experts and that sort of thing. So absolutely it applies to B2B, no question.
Okay, super. So the next topic that we're going to go ahead and get to is the one that I know that you're very anxious for, because you even brought it up in a couple emails leading up to the show as well, so this should be fun. We're actually going to be talking about CMS vendors possibly suffering an identity crisis. Actually, it was an article that was posted on the CMS Critic website by Mike Johnston on August 8th, and he basically posed that question: are CMS vendors suffering from an identity crisis? Scott, I know you're anxious, willing, and ready for this one, and we're going to go into your thoughts from the other side of it as well. Kind of go into it a little bit.
Sure. I think that Mike originally wrote this. I think the catalyst for it was probably actually a piece Ectron announced, I think their digital experience management hub or something they called it. And his point was, oh my gosh, do we really have another, is it, DXM now and that sort of a thing? And I don't think that content management vendors are necessarily going through an identity crisis. I think what they're trying to do is figure out how to differentiate themselves, right? I think that they're trying to figure out how can, we take on a shtick and get known for some things or another and what value that we're bringing. And, in that particular case, it's relevant, the notion of web versus just all digital. That's the orientation that Ectron is going. So I think it's actually less about them than CMS underlying, it is all changing. We're becoming this cluster. There's a whole lot of technologies now. We're talking about content management, we're talking about marketing automation, and all these things start to come together. And the boundaries around what before was traditionally WCM,
So you're doing it now.
I am too, are expanding, right? So the notion of web content management has started to include some other capabilities, analytics and some other things. And that's up to each vendor. And so those who have started to push that limit a little bit have tried to package their products slightly differently. I don't think, though, I don't fault the vendors. I don't think that the vendors are, them creating new acronyms is the part of the misinformation, though.
Okay, so what about from the analyst side? Let's go into that, because that's the part that I know that you've been anxious to. And I know you've actually talked about this, not necessarily on this show in particular, but you took to Twitter. Anyone who follows Scott on Twitter, you know what took place earlier in the month as well. I believe it's like August 2nd you were tweeting about it.
Yeah.
But from the analyst side, talk about that.
I went on a little mini rant. It actually wasn't much of a rant. I think I sent a tweet or two. I had gotten kind of fed up where I'm actually accused. Look, here's part of the challenge. So yes, let me address your question first. I think analysts are the ones to blame here in many cases, because we're the ones who are introducing the notion of CXM when, oh, by the way, there was the notion of customer experience management for years. It was always known as CEM. Change it slightly to make it new and interesting. That's information that doesn't need to happen. So there's just the acronym soup. And then the second thing is just that we're equating these as if they're the same. The reports that are coming out on web content management suddenly are now customer experience management, suddenly are web engagement management, as if those are all synonymous with each other. And I think that's where the misinformation comes from, and people have questions about that. I was just last week on site with a prospective customer, and I was talking about helping them with a WCM selection. And they said, well, at one point, finally, the kind of lead IT guy in the room said to me, well, what do you mean by WCM? And I was like, okay, I thought I was being pretty specific. Yeah. In fact, whatever. And his notion of it was, that it's all of these other things as well. And I was saying, no, it's actually quite. And so I think that the separation of what is WCM versus what is marketing automation versus what are these things, they're individual technologies. Together, they help to create a web experience. And companies have a strategy towards furthering web experience or engaging with customers like we've been talking about. But I don't think that we should start talking about WXM and WCXM now I've seen and all that. I think it's getting a little bit crazy, and the analysts are much at fault.
Mixing it up as well, so that's
the problem. Also when you start taking to 140 character mediums, you lose context too, right? So I might talk about web engagement management, and if you have read other things that I write, I tell you where WCM stands versus that, but in those short little things, you lose it. So I think analysts.
So with that in mind, let's go into the next news item, the very last one that we have to get to, and that's really begging the question, with standalone web content management, is it outdated at this point in time? And the reason why we're talking about this is because an article that was written by Eric Martin, a freelancer, on August 8th on the eContent website. He asked the question, are the web content management systems that many digital publishers and web content producers use today, are they outdated? I mean, kind of give me your thoughts on that. I mean, rolling from that last topic into this one, really.
And I went a little long on the last one because I knew that it kind of rolls into this one. It's part of the same thing. At the end of the day, also, we have to think about who are the buyers, right? And there is a maturity level not only of the products, and some of them take on more or less capabilities, but there's also a maturity level of the buyer. So there's the products, and then there's the buyers who are not sometimes ready to take on full-on digital automation and marketing automation and all those sorts of things. They're just trying to get their hands around all the content that they have today, and so kind of tried and true web content management is what they need. So I like that we've got a lot of products out there, some which take on the strategy, like we talked about Ectron, they're trying to just be a solid WCM. They don't have a whole lot of the other things. They've made relationships with other vendors to piece that together. Others, like a Sitecore or a Bridgeline, are building those capabilities into one system. So they take different approaches. I like the fact that there's that, it's going to be to each his own, right? Yeah. It's going to be up to the buyer, what they've already got in place today, and what they're trying to accomplish. And it's not for everybody to take on the full-on kind of marketing suite.
Okay, so expand upon that a little bit more. One of the things that we had kind of talked about beforehand, the silo strategies manage the web content instead of those enterprise content management systems that integrate with other solutions. Go into that part a little bit more as well.
Yeah, I think, look, this is 2012, is that what we're in? They'll all integrate at some level. The question is how hard or how easy it is to integrate, right? I mean, that's really the question, is how much for how much. And so I think, again, you've got some vendors who have taken on this approach that we're going to build it all together. They tend to be more oriented towards the medium-sized to smaller-sized businesses because it's an assumption that they don't already have some of those other capabilities in the environment, right? And then there's the other ones that are kind of taken on a philosophy that they're going to build a single capability, and then there's kind of tie-ins to a number of other things. Then there are those who just don't even make any assumption that you need to tie into anything else at all, that you truly are just, and that's the much smaller platforms. And then you've got open source, where it's up to the community to figure out how to build in those other capabilities. So there's a lot of, again, it's very wide and diverse about how folks have taken it on. And that's really some of the questions that you want to go through when you're looking for one of these solutions is, what do I have today in my environment? Where am I in my maturity level? What am I trying to accomplish? And then therefore, what sorts of solutions should I look for? What philosophies?
Perfect, good stuff. So that right there was in fact the news, but I mentioned the topic of the show right at the top of the show. It's all about SharePoint 2013. Now we mentioned the release, the beta version, just a couple months ago, and a lot of people are downloading it right now. But you know what? We want to take a very quick look into SharePoint 2013. Take a look.
So SharePoint and Office 2013 have finally been released in beta, and the community is now busy downloading the files from Microsoft's download centers, firing up virtual machines, and evaluating the products as we speak. Remembering back when SharePoint 2010 was released, many clients chose to stay with the current version for a number of months. So it'll certainly be interesting to see how quickly businesses migrate to the new platform. And although we're most likely a year away from seeing the first deployments, the buzz will likely pick up as we head into the fall. What's driving the buzz is a significant release by Microsoft with a ton of new features. And at the core of the web content management improvements in SharePoint 2013 is how it has simplified publishing sites and enhanced the authoring and publishing processes. And some of these new improvements include extending the user profile to include more social features than before. Microsoft is pushing its solutions towards the cloud in a very big way. Adoption of the Windows 8 Metro interface. There is now a live document preview by default. There's also a new way to navigate through a site using taxonomies based on term stores. And at the core, there's a new workflow model. So do these improvements make SharePoint 2013 a serious WCM contender? It's hard to see it coming close to the level of digital experience support that you get from an Adobe CQ5, an SDL, or a Sitecore, but the improvements are at least a step in the right direction.
All right, there you have it. So that's just kind of a brief look, a very brief look into SharePoint 2013. And what we plan to do right now over the course of the next 15, 20 minutes or so is really to dig a little bit deeper and try to find out some of the new things that are going on, some of the upgrades, some of the things that have been taken out, and really, is it for the better? That's what some of the questions that we are going to be looking to answer right now. Now, I mentioned also at the top of the show that it isn't going to be just Scott and I rattling back and forth about our thoughts and opinions about SharePoint 2013 or SharePoint in general. So we have to bring in the experts. We have to bring in the guests right now. We welcome in, first off, we welcome in Michael Pisarek, all the way to my far left, the Senior Director and Product Management, I apologize, founder at Dynamic Owl Consulting and SharePoint MVP at Microsoft, and Senior Director of Product Management for Acceler. We welcome in Gail Shlansky right next to Scott. Welcome in, guys. How you doing today?
Thank you. Great.
Right. Excellent. So first off, let's kind of get to it. Michael, I'll start with you because you're the furthest away from me right now. So I'll start with you. What are some of the new changes in SharePoint 2013 for WCM that now make it a viable opportunity and alternative for some of the other WCM products out there?
Well, I think what has happened. I think Microsoft has really listened to the partner community, and the way that WCM sites can now be created in SharePoint 2013 is really fundamentally different. And I would say it's much more than viable. It can also start to really bring new people on board to start using SharePoint as a WCM platform. Now, by far the biggest change, I think, is the ability to segregate content or the physical storage of content to the presentation, and that's something that's been brought up on the show a number of times, and I've kind of heard it from a number of people as well. Now because the WCM experience is fundamentally driven by search, we can now have content authored wherever we like on the SharePoint platform, and we can present it in whatever format we like, and we can reuse that content as well. So some great new changes there. From a mobile perspective, a lot of improvements in the mobile space as well. So natively out of the box now, SharePoint has 3 different types of mobile views: a HTML view, more of a traditional view as well. From another kind of change from the mobile perspective is this concept of device channels. So being able to target the same content to different devices natively using the new capabilities of SharePoint 2013, and that wasn't possible in previous versions. There's also a whole bunch of new APIs for mobile development and doing remote development as well. So it offers up some interesting opportunities for iOS development, for SharePoint app development, and for those sorts of things. Content authoring as well, simple but great improvements from the content authoring perspective. SEO improvements as well. We've got things like image renditions, we've got video renditions as well, and a whole range of tools as well to kind of get designers on board and make that process of designing really attractive SharePoint websites a whole lot easier. So there's a lot of new stuff. There's a lot of new stuff there.
And Gail, what's your thought on this? What's your whole thought on this SharePoint viability as a WCM tool?
Well, it's clear that when Microsoft launched 2010, they increased the value of SharePoint within an organization for collaboration, and they had some of the capabilities that people were looking for WCM, but with the launch of 2013, they've really taken it to the next level. And so it's great to see them focus on it, and it's great to see all these new features, and Michael did a great job of describing some of them. Leveraging SharePoint as a WCM environment, so now you can build sites for your intranet, but also now consider thinking about your extranet and your internet sites. It was a little bit of a challenge previously before 2013. So we're all really excited about what it provides, because it takes that infrastructure of SharePoint and it makes it available for even a broader base of use. And the users that are invested in SharePoint, the companies that are using it, and even companies that hadn't thought of SharePoint in the past can now consider using SharePoint for even more operations that they want to do.
Okay, definitely. So let me go back to you, Michael. I know it's going to seem like we're going back and forth with everything, but I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit. And Michael, is it really easier to actually create sites on SharePoint 2013 without needing the deep technical understanding in the past, or what?
Well, I think SharePoint's a platform, and really because it's not written, it's written on .NET, but it also abstracts a whole bunch of capabilities with the platform that it offers. So there still needs to be some technical skills in, to create those sites. I think what Microsoft has done though is started using more kind of industry standards and kind of to bring other people on board. So a real good example of this is now the design manager experience. So what we can do now, we can get a designer to essentially design branding assets like HTML files and CSS and JavaScript and so forth. And then SharePoint, through this new capability called the Design Manager, is actually going to facilitate that process of taking standard branding assets and convert them into those specific SharePoint assets like master pages and so forth. So it makes it a whole bunch easier to get agencies on board or designers on board to kind of create a really fantastic design for your SharePoint site. And then you can actually go through that process of converting it into those SharePoint assets that you need. The other change that I like as well is that instead of rendering out components using XSLT, and for anyone who's used XSLT, it's not particularly fun. All of the front-end rendering now is using standard technologies: HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So I think it's going to bring a whole range of new people to the table when traditional web designers, which have these fantastic skills and they're used to using these sorts of tools and technologies, can now leverage them in the new version of SharePoint.
Okay, so my opinions are relatively known. You alluded to them before about SharePoint, so help me. Gail, maybe you can help me. What I've talked about is that SharePoint as a foundational tool for building on a web experience has just not been so great. You didn't have that separation of content from presentation before. You didn't really have much componentization of content to set yourself up to be able to do personalization down the road or any of those sorts of things. Sharing of content was something that many organizations really need, and it was very difficult there. How does it stack up against some of the more traditional web content management tools that are in the market today? Help me understand where it stacks up and where it falls down against them. I guess I'll leave that for either of you.
Well, I think in general what we find is that different content management systems, web content management systems are really good at certain things, and some of them are better one thing than another. And SharePoint is going down the road of becoming a web content management system, and that customer that is going to find the best value out of SharePoint as that infrastructure is probably still yet to be defined, but it's certainly the ones that are looking at SharePoint within their enterprise already, right? So it seems like a likely place where it will have immediate traction, let's say. So enterprises that are starting to think about what they're going to do from an internet perspective or from an extranet perspective, and the idea of being able to collaborate across all those channels, having a powerful extranet, has huge value to an enterprise. So I think that as you look at the different web content management systems, they all sort of have their own special strengths and special areas that people feel that they're good at, and it's going to be the same. It's going to continue to be that.
Okay, you haven't sold me yet. So, because I feel like what you just told me, while a great answer, I feel like what you just told me was that if you've already got SharePoint, SharePoint should be in the game. Well, that's the only reason they're making it to the table today, right? Yep. I would never, ever, ever put them in a deal as a standalone WCM unless it's pure brochureware, in which case it's way too expensive to go put in just for that reason. So the understanding is always that they're already in the organization. So, but help me understand how they compare fundamentally, foundationally as a WCM tool against some of these other ones that are out there that were built for the notion of marketing and marketing to an audience, whether that audience is an internal audience or that audience is an external audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think still in this version, there have been changes. There's still some things that the platform doesn't do, right? So CXM, for instance, I mean, it doesn't exist in SharePoint 2013 in terms of defining segments or channels and doing those sorts of things. So there's some limitations there, but of course the way that Microsoft views it is, of course, it's a partner opportunity, right? Where hopefully someone will actually create a product to be able to support those capabilities.
It's a big hope. I mean,
it is,
you have to. We've talked about this before. Yeah. You remember, Tyler? We talked about remember the rant that I was on one time was that the commoditization of web content management, as people have called it, where it's kind of like that. The publishing aspect of it, but the underlying capabilities, that foundation, they talk about it being commoditized, and I say it's very different from one to the next. And your ability to grow with the product, grow into, we just said, customer experience management is way too far-fetched for many organizations. They're not trying to create this kind of deal with many audiences and personalize and that sort of orient content, but they all presume to want that down the road at some point, yep. Right? If SharePoint at its base can't support that, what tools or add-ons are possibly going to be able to do that? To me, it's a foundational thing, and so we're still talking about a brochureware capability that's a little bit nicer for agencies to use. Tell me what I'm wrong.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, a lot of organizations, let's be honest, have SharePoint internally for the collaboration needs. Right? Let's be honest. Now, yep. And for those organizations now, I think last time when we had Acceler on, the number of people using SharePoint for their public-facing websites is like 15%. Mm-hmm. Now, if they start using SharePoint 2013, which has got all of these rich capabilities, just the savings and synergies you can have to move the collaboration platform, maybe the intranet, a public-facing website, and an extra scenario mm-hmm. on a single platform, and utilize all of those synergies would be great. The other thing that's interesting with using search with this new version is that the content that I present doesn't even have to be stored on SharePoint. Because as long as I can index that content from a line of business system or somewhere else, I can treat that content exactly the same way as I would treat it if it was in SharePoint and personalize it and create those sites that way. So I think those types of scenarios are really interesting. And it's a little bit different from some of the other traditional CMS vendors, right? So I think in the correct scenario, and even in now broader set scenarios, I think SharePoint 2013 is actually going to be a pretty viable option.
Gail, add to that a little bit more as well, because I saw you when Scott started going that you were ready to jump on him again right there. So I'm anxious to get your thoughts from that perspective.
Well, no, I think that there, as Michael said, there's a lot of value in leveraging an infrastructure that is already storing resources, content, and is where people are working together and doing the workflows associated with sign-offs and stuff like that. And clearly, 2013 hasn't shipped yet, and we're still working with the public releases, the public betas. So it is definitely something that is on its way. But we're all anxious to see where it actually does land.
I'm going to give a big fat check mark to, if you've already got it, take a look maybe, right? So at that point, I get it. Now, let's talk about the ecosystem of SharePoint. We've talked about it in the past, and you're well living within it, both of you are, that, we talked about before the purchase of Yammer. And what that maybe did to the new NewsGator strategy maybe has to shift, and we'll talk later about the new management team they've brought in that will partially address that. Certainly, you guys are in the ecosystem providing tools and capabilities that are built on it. With them making some of these changes that they have in 2013, who have they ticked off? What services did people provide, or platforms or capabilities or tools now are no longer required because they've said, we've chomped this up and we can do this out of box now?
So I think that any partner who is engaged with Microsoft is engaged in the early programs and involved in the strategy and the direction and seeing the products as they evolve.
They're a big, transparent, open book, you're saying, really?
And,
Microsoft
not a big, transparent, open book, but certainly that's part of the infrastructure that they have for the partners. As a company, we've done this with other partners that we've built products for as well, and it's part of being a partner. And if you're expecting that your world isn't going to change, then you're being naive. Because the reality is that Microsoft's going to go wherever they need to go with the product. And they're going to make investments that they need to make. So it's part of being a partner. It's part of the partner program that they've set up, and being engaged with the partner program and being part of the whole ecosystem. So,
Michael, talk a little bit more about the Windows 8 experience, almost in a sense, because that's what everybody's been looking at, is the user interface, really, and people are wondering, okay, what are all these apps that we're actually utilizing in the interface itself? Like it, love it, hate it? Let me gauge your interest.
I'm going to reserve my judgment on it. I mean, I've been using Windows 8 a little bit. I think Microsoft has to be admired because it's a pretty fundamental shift in direction that they're having. And I think the idea is to provide that consistent experience for enterprise users or for any users across any device that you use. So whether it's SharePoint, whether it's Outlook, whether it's Windows, or whether it's Windows Phone. Tablets as well. So I'm not sure if it's a little bit early. I mean, I think in the enterprise, I do a lot of SharePoint work, and to be honest with you, the majority of the work we have around rolling out SharePoint is around change management. And users are very resistant to change, right? Most organizations, users see more, from the point of what they're going to lose as opposed to what they're going to gain. So I think it might be kind of a slow road for Windows 8. I love the interface. I think it's got a lot of advantages, particularly as touch-enabled devices make their presence felt, right? Then I think it's going to make complete sense. So maybe in a year or two.
Yeah. And I would echo sort of Michael's experiences with enterprises. Enterprises don't, in general, quickly digest new interfaces that they have to retrain users. Their users have been trained on how to use whatever that tool is that they're using. And it's a costly thing for an enterprise. However, users pick up and use the tablet devices, the iPads, the iPhones, all of the devices that we've been seeing enter the marketplace, and they pick them up and use them, and there's been no hurdle to entry for those, right? We've seen those take off dramatically. So a UI, a new user experience that has that compelling information provided to you and easy to use and intuitive is going to take people in the next generation.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
I was just saying to a client yesterday, they were looking at a couple of tools, and a number of the .NET solutions, for example, have taken down the notion of the ribbon and those sorts of things, the .NET WCM tools. And I think, look, whether the ribbon is the most human factors design, usable, could a kid pick it up and use it? I don't know, but what usability often is just familiarity, right? Yeah. And so the notion of familiarity, that the learning curve is low, I think that's super valid, what you're saying.
Look at the example of Office 2003 to 2007 when the ribbon came in, right? Most people hated it. Now people love it, right? I mean, I went back to using Office 2003, you can't find anything. So I think, like you said, that time and the familiarity aspect is going to play a huge part.
Yeah.
And the cost of it, I mean, you said something there. I mean, that's the one thing I think a lot of people are going to start to look at as far as from the enterprise level is concerned. They're going to start think and wonder, all right, what is this actually going to cost me to train the users? And I think that's one thing that needs to be talked about, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I think in a cost solution, so we've talked about this before in the past, that the costs, at least from a WCM perspective around SharePoint, have traditionally been pretty high when you're trying to keep pace with what some of the other tools do out of the box. Look, I like that it sounds like they're doing some other things. But I thought what they were just going to do is add features, functions on the top to try to keep paces with the things. The fact they've done some of that separation of content from presentation makes me feel better. I'm not sold at all. I value the check that I gave them that basically says there's plenty of users, plenty of businesses out there who could potentially make use of this. We talked about maturity before, that not every organization is up for having more than, frankly, an online brochure. So I get that. I guess any last points from either of you? Can you convince me more? I'm still not sold. But
well, I think the other thing I think that's really happening, and this is part of SharePoint 2013 as well, which is the App Store and the consumerization of IT. And I think that you're going to see more and more where, yeah, it is. No, you're going to see more and more of users defining what they want to use and picking the things and the applications that they want to use. And it allows an enterprise to now, or users to actually drive the enterprise in the direction that makes sense for them. I mean, there's lots of other issues with it, but in general, it's a different world. Central IT doesn't control everything anymore, and people are starting to do what they feel comfortable with, and they have a lot of experience on the web and everywhere else.
Yeah, and I think from a WCM perspective, I think users and organizations are now really taking a strategic look in how they manage information, and part of that is this WCM space. Right. So I think what's happening now is if you've got the option now to use SharePoint to manage all of those information assets across your entire organization, internal, external, whatever that is, SharePoint 2013 is a really, really compelling solution.
Excellent. Guys, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Great stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Excellent. All right. So that was Michal Pisarek and Gail Shlansky joining us right here on CMS Connected. Big thank you to them for stopping by. But we do, in fact, have to move on. And it's time to go in the spotlight. In today's spotlight, we have Kentico. So Kentico helps their customers create websites, intranets, community sites, and e-commerce solutions, providing a full-featured and scalable web content management solution on the Microsoft.NET platform. Kentico is headquartered in the Czech Republic, has offices in Nashua, New Hampshire, Seattle, Washington, Reading, UK, and Sydney, Australia. Its partner network consists of 1,200 partners in the 80-plus countries and is a Microsoft Gold certified partner. Now, here to talk a little bit more about this and really give a deeper look, we welcome in Stephen Medve from Falcon-Software. Stephen, good to see you. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Good day, everyone. Great show, by the way. Tyler and Scott, thank you again. I'm livid to be on the show to talk about Kentico.
All right, so let's go ahead and do exactly that. Let's kick it off. Kind of first off, give me your overall thoughts on the Kentico platform itself.
Well, great. Let's get right into it. Yeah, so Kentico is great for organizations who really want to get a robust web presence up and running, with really not getting the sticker shock on how much they're going to have to pay for licensing. Kentico's business model and approach is really to lose that overinflated licensing structure that other CMS products have in the market, but still offer as much, if not more, deep functionality out of the box. They really are applying the strategy that volume sales will create long-term growth. And personally, knowing the product very well, this is great for administrators. Developers love the product, and it really meets most of the organization's needs now and for the future because it has deep WCM functionality.
Pricing model, and we've got it up on screen right now. Talk about the licensing structure, though. Go into that a little bit more.
This is interesting. There's some interesting issues and opportunities with Kentico because Kentico is very low cost, high functional solution. There have been multiple instances where I get a call from a potential client asking me, why is this product so inexpensive? What's wrong with the product? Is it a stable product? Is the functionality as good as another product? These are really interesting questions because Kentico could increase their price to dispel a lot of these initial questions, but because of their business model, they're really, they're trying that strategy of volume sales. So here's the prices at a glance. Your base license price is $2,000 per license per URL. They don't charge for staging and development environments, which is a big plus. It's only for the production servers. Now, where most people and organizations are going to fit in is that ultimate license. It's $4,500 for most of the complex websites. It has integrated web analytics, Active Directory integration, unlimited e-commerce, and product listings outside of Basic, which only has 100 product listings available to it. It has document libraries, project management, and work groups for, say, an intranet. Just to let you know, Falcon-Software uses Kentico for our intranet. It also has social networking. So if you're looking for that Web 2.0 experience, you have forums, blogs, groups, friends, message boards. Chat, which is in version 6, has now been upgraded in version 7 to do even more. It has automatic posting for Facebook and Twitter. And now with the mobile preview and layouts in version 7, you can now edit your content, your mobile content, within Kentico, within your mobile device, excuse me. So the next step is enterprise marketing. Their solution there is about $15,000 and up. So you have a complete upgrade path through each version. And what that offers is drip marketing, if you need email marketing through A/B testing, if you need some health monitoring. They have a new visual workflow designer. For languages, they support translation management. And they actually have a connector for translation.com. So that's Kentico's licensing in a nutshell.
All right, so you mentioned some of the features as far as version 7 was concerned. Go into that a little bit more. What are some of the other new features that are coming out as far as Kentico version 7?
So I've been looking at version 7, and my personal favorite is their new wireframe module. Kentico has managed to keep this under the hood. This is going to allow you, an organization, to work with Kentico a little sooner in the creative planning process of the website. You no longer need that third-party external tool like Axure or Omnigraphel to create your wireframes. You can work as a team within the wireframe set. You can also use the original hierarchy of the wireframe to move that hierarchy to an actual website, which is extremely important in my mind. You can add wireframing within an existing page for evaluation and approval, which brings me to my next point, which is advanced workflow processes. So they've upgraded this. This is an extension of their older streamlined publishing workflow. Here's what the difference is. You have a new visual designer, which uses drag and drop functionality, connect processes and transitions. Entirely editable, so you can customize actions into the processes. This will now work to help power the new marketing automation features. So the last segment here is the new marketing automation suite is really powerful in terms of helping you with your marketing segmentation. And it really maximizes your value through email campaigns. You can now create an A/B test for your newsletter and email blasts. It has drip marketing with emails to allow you to automate tailored email workflows, so you can align paths for people who do or don't open your emails, for instance, and automatically send a follow-up based on the actions they take. So developers can now separate standard content database and the online marketing database by using a new separation wizard, which makes it extremely easy. So that's really the high level of Kentico's new version 7.
I was going to say, you just rattled off, a dozen or so features, to be honest with you. There's a ton of them right there. But let's talk about the marketplace in particular. What are some of its strengths as it does in fact pertain to the marketplace?
Overall, Kentico has a lot of clients that are currently running environments with hundreds of websites that are supporting 20 to 30 million visitors per month per users. They have sites that support millions of pages of content, complex architectures, and they provide an open and well-documented API. But what's the differentiator is that price point. It's one of the strongest products on the market currently. And I'll just be honest, most of the questions that I tend on answering are really why is this product so inexpensive? And that's Kentico in a nutshell.
Awesome. Stephen, honestly, thank you so much for coming by. Really appreciate good stuff as always, and I'm sure I'll catch up with you next month, right?
Exactly. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Excellent stuff indeed. So Scott, with everything that he just said, kind of give us your company review entirely.
Yeah.
I mean, you've worked with them as well. So
yeah, I think first of all, it was a great overview by Stephen. So this is a nice value add to the show for those who are looking into to see the products a little bit more closely. So my take on Kentico is we've talked about some other ones in the marketplace that are similar in nature. We talked about Elcom either last month or the month before. Kind of similar idea that the good thing about them is that they know who their audience is, and that being the mid-market to kind of lower end tier, and they serve that audience really well. It's a very feature-rich product. It's for folks who are really kind of on the maturity of the overall enterprise. They might be lower, but they have contemporary needs in terms of integrating with their audience. I think that's who we're talking about as a good buyer for Kentico.
Talk about as far as the company itself, meaning stability. I mean, everybody wants to know about that. So talk to that a little bit more.
No, very stable. They've been in business for a while. Very, very stable business model. They're not public, so we don't have tons of information about them. But they certainly they have very good customer retention. So they have a lot of customers because of the price point. They've got lots and lots of customers out there. They're spreading really quickly, basically throughout the world, to be honest. Yeah. They're pretty well integrated all over the place, although they're based, I think, over in Czech Republic. Yes. I think a point that I want to make about them is that here's the thing. To you larger enterprise solutions, so when you're just evaluating, and here it gets back to this point, if you're doing a feature function comparison, it's getting harder and harder. We've talked a lot about this kind of checkbox RFP. We did a thing with Arena one time way back when.
Almost a year ago.
That if you're just looking for like check the box, can it do this? Can it do that? Can it do the other thing? They're going to check an awful lot of those boxes. It's very feature rich. That's not the questions to be asking, though, a lot of times, because that's starting to be the commoditized thing is, can you do all those sorts of capabilities? The question is in the maturity of each one of those. So it's the yes, but, and here's how we do it, and here's our fundamental, some of that, the quote-unquote commoditized portions of the platform that it's built on. When I say that it typically is more appropriate for less mature organization, enterprise, smaller, so do they do globalization? Yes, check the box. But it's like, it's not like when you've got lots of global sites that are managed locally and you're trying to figure out some parts they can manage locally, some parts you should manage centrally. It's a much more mature back and forth workflow required, not going to necessarily do that so well. Other capabilities, coupled management and delivery. If you've got, we talked earlier about some of those other, if you've got marketing automation, you've got some other tools to build in, is it the best one for being able to integrate other capabilities? It's nice because it's built on the .NET platform, so APIs are plentiful, but it's not necessarily made to be this plug-and-play, multi-tiered stuff. So check the boxes. Yes, we're finding more and more of these kind of cheaper solutions that are satisfying lots and lots of feature function needs. And so it's not about that so much. It's about more of the size and maturity and the complexity of the organization's content.
Interesting stuff. That right there is in the spotlight with Kentico. Good stuff as always, but now, in fact, we do have to move on. We're going to take a look at Rapid Fire. Yes, it's one of the segments that has, in fact, become a mainstay here on CMS Connected. So let's go ahead. We basically put a minute on the clock. Let Scott try to rattle through as many things as we possibly can in about six or 7 minutes, give or take. So let's first start by talking about Easy Systems, because they appointed a new VP. Now, Norway-based software vendor Easy Systems has appointed Dylan Williams as Vice President of the Americas. Now, CEO Gabriel Weibach said in a statement that Williams' nearly 30 years experience in direct sales and service management will help the company's New York team bring forward our goals of increasing our market share and broadening the presence of Easy Systems, particularly in North America. Kind of give me your thoughts on that, Scott.
Sure. First of all, I like Easy Systems as a platform. I like Dylan Williams as a person. I've known him since his Gartner days when I was buying spots on the floor of Gartner trade shows. So I think a good match for both of these guys. Dylan is very good at building up a partner base, and I think that's where the place where Easy Systems is right now. They've been trying to make the play in the US for quite some time. They've really been trying to make a big push here to, frankly, not that much avail. I think it's about finding those good partners who are willing to invest in your product and invest in learning your product, because as we've said before, it really is all about that. It's about the folks who are going to do the services work, the implementation quality itself, the knowledge and fluency with the system is what it's all about. So I think he's going to really be able to help that. They as a platform and growing, I think for them, it's going to be about who they select for those partnerships and who Dylan brings in as a support team, because really it's not going to be the thing you want to do is just go spread and get as many partnerships signed on as you possibly can. But they're rather, you don't want them to be these shallow relationships. You want folks that are learning and investing in the product. So I think good luck to him to do that. I think it's a good move. I know Gabby has big aspirations, not only for the company, but for Dylan here. So good luck to Easy Systems here. I think it's a pretty good move for them overall.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's move on to Sitecore and their latest investment. Now, Sitecore actually has taken a large minority investment in Comfo, I believe it's pronounced, a Denmark-based social media marketing platform provider and a member of Facebook's preferred marketing developer program, actually. Sitecore says it plans to integrate the Comfo platform into its customer engagement platform as well.
Yeah, and so here again, now we're talking about, we mentioned Sitecore before as one of the examples of a WCM product that's really expanding the bounds of what WCM does in they've built a digital marketing suite and taken on all sorts of marketing automations. Here now they're talking about social media monitoring and social media management. Specifically, Comfo plays in the area of Facebook, which is something that many folks, many organizations have decided that a Facebook presence is important for them. And now we're trying to, again, back to the roots of web content management, is about how can you manage all the content in all of your various channels, Facebook being a very important one of those. So the thing about this for Sitecore is that though they've been traditionally built by, they've mostly built their products, their capabilities natively, not that many acquisitions for them. We know that they took on some money a little bit ago, so maybe this is some of what they're doing with it. Maybe there's more purchases in the future for them. So I think it's a little bit of a different direction for them. They've been more about partnership, but I think, again, all in the eyes of bringing more of that feature function to the table, being this all-in-one suite. Sitecore is certainly moving up the platform in terms of being able to be more enterprise-oriented. They are no longer your kind of mid-market solution. I think they're also in the leaders quadrant if you look at Gartner. So I think it's a good move for them.
All right, so let's go and let's actually talk about a couple local companies as far as proximity to here with us in Boston, Mass. Basically, New England companies, really. Let's talk about it on August 8th, actually, because Ectron and HubSpot, all-in-one marketing software vendor, announced that they have entered into a strategic partnership, actually. The new partnership encompasses product integration and joint sales and marketing. Two big companies here in New England, Scott.
Yeah, it is, and I actually was privileged just to have dinner with the executive team over at Ectron just a couple of days ago, Monday of this week, since I've been in town here, and they've got a lot of good things brewing. There's been a lot of, Ectron's been in the press quite a bit lately, some good and some bad. They've taken on some really good partnerships recently. And so, this is an example pretty typical for them where they are, again, talking about creating partnerships and less about actually building things into their platform, but more about working with other kind of best-of-breed solutions. So here's their stake at trying to get into this notion of marketing automation. And I think, look, there's no question HubSpot has a huge client list. They're working with a whole lot of customers out there. And so it's good, no question, for the Ectron brand from the standpoint of its reach and its ability to be able to be pulled into some of those customers. The challenge for me a little bit, so I like the idea that they're kind of getting into the marketing automation. No doubt their digital experience management capabilities have been furthered through this partnership. The question for me is that HubSpot traditionally is oriented towards your much smaller DCG we have it, so a much smaller clientele, and Ectron's trying to move up into the enterprise. And so those two things, they conflict for me a little bit, but maybe HubSpot's also trying to make that entry into the larger enterprise.
Okay, let's move on to Liewehr, because open source enterprise solutions provider Liewehr actually launched Liewehr Marketplace. It's actually a place where users could download enterprise apps and different themes as well. Now, at the launch, there are actually 70 different developed apps and themes so far in the marketplace, and it continues to grow. Kind of give me your thoughts on this, Scott.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is actually, Gail mentioned earlier, she talked about Microsoft creating their kind of app space as well, and so this tends to be the place. Look, Liewehr is a wonderful open source. It's a commercial open source system, and so it's very much it was a natural next step for them to go and create a way for the community to create applications and to be able to market them. It also tends to give a little bit of more, robust and credibility to each one of the apps, as there's a level of kind of maybe not as rigorous as in the Apple world, but there's a level of rigor around kind of the qualifications to be able to make it into that app space and how that gets marketed. So I think it's a great move for Liewehr. It's again one of those benefits that tends to be associated with open source, but quite frankly, many of the proprietary vendors should be looking at this. I think there's only a couple who have taken on this notion, but you can definitely look to the community and partnerships to be able to build on many of those capabilities that you don't necessarily want to take on yourself. So I think it's a great move for Liewehr. I think it's a great move for Liewehr customers. Their kind of portal capabilities are primed and ready for this sort of a thing. So that's good.
Let's go ahead and let's talk about Elcom, because the Australian-based WCM vendor is actually expanding its U.S. operations with another office in San Francisco. The California location opens up just 18 months after Elcom opened its first North American office in New York City. Scott, big news, small news, something that we could just say, okay, this is great, and let's keep going, or what?
Teeny tiny news. This is really small news, and I should have prepped a little bit more in editing for the show. This is very small news. I think, look, the big news was when Elcom, I think, moved over from, they were based in Australia and they moved into the US. That was big news, and that happened about 18 months ago. And the other big news is that Elcom has been penetrating the US pretty darn well. I mean, I'm seeing them in a lot of deals. They're definitely matching up very well against the likes of their competitors that they're facing a lot, the Ectrons, they're facing Sitecore a lot, they're facing even the Kenticos a lot and that sort of thing. They bring a lot to the market. Whether they moved their office from the East Coast to the West Coast, we're not talking about necessarily the addition of many offices here. They're not hugely expanding. So to me, it's not the top news, but I think, look, for those of you vendors out there who are looking to expand into the US, they've set a good platform for how you can do it, how you can kind of land and expand and penetrate, because they definitely, much more quickly than many of the other organizations who have been trying to expand into the US, they've made a really good impact really quickly. So good on them.
All right, well, NewsGator continues to make news of their own. This is something we continue to talk about. Changing of the guard at NewsGator. JB Holston, he's actually moving up to chairman of the board, and iFridge and company founder Daniel Kraft is actually taking his place as president and CEO. I mean, big news. NewsGator, we've actually talked about them a couple times now inside Rapid Fire the last couple of months.
This is big news. Let's talk about NewsGator. So a couple of months ago, we saw that Microsoft bought Yammer. And we talked about that here in the show. And a colleague of mine, Tim Walters, actually wrote a blog post on our thing that basically said, NewsGator is crying alligator tears. Look, I think that might have, while I still stand behind that, I think that it's true, the notion is that they needed to take a little bit of a different strategy than the one they had before when Microsoft goes on and takes on that capability. They are still very, very dedicated to the Microsoft platform. There's still plenty of room for them to play. I had dinner last week in Denver with the new CEO, Daniel Kraft, and Stephanie Lightman, the new SVP of strategy for them. And they're hyped about this. I think Daniel was the former CEO that ended up selling Red Dot. So he's got a history, quite frankly, of lots of acquisitions. So there might be some news there in the not so distant future with them about why they brought him in. But I think he's also got a story around how he's expanded companies and brought them into new areas. So I think you're going to think about them going up against the likes of Jive.
Awesome, very cool. Good show as always today, Scott, huh?
It was a good show. I think we had a lot of quotes to bring in that you were forced to read, and we had lots of content, but I think we got it done.
No, it was a lot of fun stuff indeed. I think a lot of people had some pretty good takeaways for sure. So I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors, first and foremost Falcon-Software, and of course Digital Clarity Group as well, who helped put this entire show on. And on behalf of my co-host Scott Liewehr and our special guest today, Michael Pisarek and Gail Shlansky, and of course Stephen Medve as well. Big thanks to those guys as well. Good stuff today, Scott. I love it. Always love having the show on a good note. So for Scott, I'm Tyler Pyburn. This right here is CMS Connected. We'll see you next month where we tackle big data. Till then, have a good one.